Mu Feng said that Mu Chen should learn about spirit arrays, and he was clearly not just saying this for fun. Therefore, the next day, Mu Chen met the spirit array master that Mu Feng had arranged for him. The man was a somewhat thin, middle-aged figure, dressed in a gray-white robe. His face showed no signs of a smile, giving him a particularly stern appearance. Although he was one of Mu Feng's subordinates, when he saw Mu Feng, he did not act overly respectful or humble. Instead, he maintained an air of calmness and confidence. "This is Mr. Wenling. He will teach you the basic knowledge of spirit arrays from now on," Mu Feng said with a smile, pointing to the middle-aged man beside him. "Mu Chen greets Mr. Wan." Mu Chen cupped his fists in a respectful gesture, not showing any airs of a young master, his expression humble. The man, Wenling, nodded slightly without speaking. "You better study hard. Mr. Wenling is known for being strict. Although you're my son, if he feels you lack the talent, he will not continue teaching you just because of your status. Do you understand?" Mu Feng warned. Wenling was a guest elder invited to their Liu Domain. Although he was only a first-grade spirit array master, there were less than 10 spirit array masters in Liu Domain, and Wenling was the strongest among them. Mu Chen nodded. He had never studied spirit arrays, and there were no dedicated spirit array masters available for hire in ordinary circumstances, so the number of such experts in the northern spirit realm was scarce. Perhaps, once he entered one of the 5 great academies, he would receive more specialized training in spirit arrays. But for now, in the northern spirit realm, he would have to start by learning the basics. "All right, go ahead and study with Mr. Wan. I have things to take care of," Mu Feng said, reassured. With Mu Chen being sensible, Mu Feng trusted that he wouldn't do anything that would make the teacher upset and leave in frustration. Besides, Mu Feng had been very busy recently with matters regarding the 9 Nether Sparrow, always keeping an eye on any developments in the Liu Domain. "Please, have a seat, Mr. Wan," Mu Chen said with a smile. Once Mu Feng left, Wenling nodded and sat down. His serious face glanced at Mu Chen briefly before he spoke. "I heard from the Domain Lord that you once had a confrontation with Xun'er." Mu Chen didn't expect Wenling to suddenly bring this up. He paused for a moment, then nodded. "Do you know what kind of array Xun'er used to deal with you?" Wenling asked again. "Probably 2 spirit arrays. One was the Mirage God array to trap me, and the other was the Rain Spirit array to attack me," Mu Chen answered after thinking for a moment. "Both are relatively simple first-grade spirit arrays. Looks like Xun'er still fears your father and didn't dare to kill you directly," Wenling commented. "From what I know, the strongest array Xun'er can set up should be the Blood Rain Killing Matrix. This is a formation comparable to a second-grade spirit array. Once activated, even someone in the late spirit will stage would be in serious trouble." Mu Chen scratched his head, realizing that his victory had been a bit of a fluke. However, being able to break through those 2 spirit arrays with your strength is no small feat, Wenling said, giving Mu Chen a slight nod. His usually emotionless face showed a hint of appreciation. "Now, let's talk about spirit arrays." Wenling waved his hand. Simply put, a spirit array involves channeling spiritual energy in a special way to create resonance, which then draws on the natural energy of the world, achieving both offensive and defensive effects. But causing such resonance is extremely complex and difficult. In some lower realms, setting up arrays is easier because their energy is not as dense and complex as in the Great Thousand Worlds. Therefore, in a way, spirit arrays in the Great Thousand Worlds are more advanced and complex than most arrays found in lower realms. Wenling extended his hand, which appeared unusually long and slender compared to his ordinary appearance. Mu Chen focused on his hand, where spiritual energy quickly gathered at his fingertips and transformed into 5 intricate and small spirit seals. These seals looked exceptionally complex, yet they emitted a unique fluctuation, with the surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth subtly swirling around them. These are spirit seals, essential for setting up a spirit array. Spirit seals? Mu Chen was taken aback, clearly unfamiliar with them. Wenling nodded slightly, flicked his finger, and immediately, the 5 spirit seals flew out of his hand. They seemed to vanish into the sea like raindrops blending into the water. However, as the seals disappeared, Mu Chen suddenly felt a gust of wind blow at him, causing him to stagger slightly. Mu Chen was startled and narrowed his eyes. Only then did he vaguely notice that the air in front of him seemed to be slightly distorted, with faint, almost invisible lines of light interweaving. At the end of these light beams were the 5 tiny spirit seals. "Is this a spirit array?" he asked. When Ling nodded, "This is just a minor spirit array. It's not even considered a first-grade array. Arranging a spirit array requires absolute control over the spirit seals. Even the slightest fluctuation or resonance can cause the formation to fail. Sometimes, if the formation fails, it can backfire and harm the user. In severe cases, it can even cost you your life because such a failure is like the array turning against you, launching a savage attack on its creator. Generally speaking, the more powerful the spirit array, the more spirit seals are needed, and the harder it is to control them." When Ling continued, "I am a first-grade spirit array master, and the maximum I can control is 20 spirit seals. Any more, and it would be uncontrollable. As far as I know, those who are master array masters of 5th grade and above can manipulate hundreds or even thousands of spirit seals with a simple gesture. Their power is so immense that even those at the divine soul stage would be reduced to ashes in an instant." Mu Chen clicked his tongue in admiration. Spirit seals are the foundation of any array, but there's another indispensable component. "What's that?" Mu Chen asked. "The array diagram," Wen Ling replied casually. "The formation of an array is highly complex, much like a grand engineering project. The spirit seals are the foundation and channels for energy infusion, while the array diagram is the blueprint. Without a complete blueprint, the project cannot even begin." Wen Ling then reached into his robe and slowly pulled out an emerald-like jade tube, which emitted a faint glow. "This is a first-grade array diagram, called the Spirit Thunder Array." Mu Chen curiously took the tube and unrolled the array diagram. Immediately, brilliant light flooded his eyes. The diagram was filled with intricate lines that intertwined and connected in complex ways, ultimately forming an array that shimmered with a faint lightning glow. Array diagrams are the most enticing things for spirit array masters. Whenever a high-level array diagram appears, it inevitably sparks fierce competition among array masters. Array diagrams, like spirit array masters, are also ranked in 9 grades. In all my years, the highest level array diagram I've seen is a 4th-grade diagram, Wen Ling said, his serious face showing a trace of envy and longing when he mentioned the 4th-grade diagram. "Of course, array diagrams are still too advanced for you at this stage," he added. Wen Ling looked at Mu Chen and handed him a jade slip. "This contains the cultivation method for spirit seals. Try to see if you can cultivate it. In some ways, this is the most basic test for beginners. If you feel clumsy or slow during the practice, you should stop, because it means you lack sensitivity to spirit seals, and thus, you don't have the necessary talent." Mu Chen took the jade slip without saying anything further. He closed his eyes and began absorbing the cultivation method for the spirit seals within. After about an hour, Mu Chen slowly opened his eyes and set the jade slip down, his expression thoughtful. The cultivation of spirit seals was somewhat similar to the refinement of the sinister death seal, but it was not as complex. Of course, this did not mean that becoming a spirit array master was easier than refining the sinister death seal. After all, the number of spirit seals a spirit array master needed to control far exceeded the number of sinister death seals. Mu Chen had managed to refine 2 sinister death seals, but what about 20 or even 200 spirit seals? Clearly, the difficulty of controlling them was incomparable. Mu Chen pondered for a while, then closed his eyes once again. Extending his hand, dark spiritual energy flickered at his fingertips. As the light fluctuated, he tried to cultivate the spirit seals. Wen Ling quietly observed Mu Chen as he began attempting to cultivate the spirit seals. In the quiet room, Wen Ling's face was stern, and his gaze was indifferent as he looked at the young man in front of him. The young man had his eyes tightly closed, and from his right palm, dark spiritual energy pulsed and fluctuated. It seemed as though the energy was gradually taking shape. Wen Ling stared at the young man, then a moment later, turned his gaze away with a soft sigh. Mu Chen had been in this state for a full hour now, far longer than he had expected. Typically, when a beginner with some talent in the profession of spirit array master first tries to practice spirit seals, They can usually form the first seal within about half an hour. Some with greater talent might even do it faster. However, Mu Chen had spent an entire hour without forming a single seal. His sense of energy could only be described as sluggish. This caused Wenling to feel a bit of regret. He had naturally heard of Mu Chen's impressive talent in cultivation, but it seemed that his talent did not extend to the field of spirit array mastery. Although he felt some regret, Wenling didn't harbor other thoughts. After all, he had seen similar situations countless times. Many geniuses in cultivation weren't necessarily talented in other areas. The world, after all, was a bit fair in that regard. As time passed, the quiet sigh from Wenling signaled the continued passing of time. Another half hour went by, and finally, Wenling saw the young man slowly open his eyes. Yet, there was still no seal formed in his palm. Wenling found this somewhat unbelievable. No matter how slow one was, it shouldn't be impossible to form at least one seal. What happened? Why haven't you formed even a single seal? Are you distracted? Wenling frowned, his expression turning stern. Mu Chen awkwardly shook his head and hesitated before replying, "It's not that I couldn't form one. I'm just not sure if I did it right." "Not sure?" Wenling was taken aback. Mu Chen thought for a moment, then extended his long hand. Dark light surged from his palm as the shadowy spiritual energy flickered at his fingertips. Then, Wenling saw a spirit seal slowly emerge. "So, you succeeded after all." Wenling sighed in relief upon seeing this. However, just as he was about to relax, Mu Chen's fingertips seemed to form another seal. "Two." Wenling's eyebrows twitched in surprise. As his eyebrows raised, the changes in Mu Chen's hand didn't stop. Black light surged again, and a third spirit seal appeared. After that, 2 more seals followed, one after the other, until 5 spirit seals appeared at Mu Chen's fingertips. 5 spirit seals. Wenling stood there, stunned, staring at the 5 dark spirit seals on Mu Chen's fingers. It felt as though his mind had frozen for a moment. A look of disbelief surfaced in his previously stern eyes. He could never have imagined that Mu Chen would be able to form 5 spirit seals on his first try. When Wenling himself was a beginner, it had taken him a full half-month to achieve that, because the more seals one formed, the harder it became to condense them. Mu Chen, noticing Wenling's dazed expression, shook his head slightly. The seals in his palm flickered and dissipated in confusion. He muttered, "Did I do something wrong?" Although he had never studied the profession of spirit array master, he knew just how difficult it was. Yet, when he had tried to form the seals just now, it hadn't felt difficult at all. It was as though everything came naturally, even smoother than his usual cultivation. This left him somewhat perplexed, wondering if he had made some mistake in forming the seals. Otherwise, how could it have been so effortless? Wenling finally snapped out of his daze. His eyes still locked on Mu Chen's hand, he moved his lips and said, "Why you? You probably didn't make a mistake." As he spoke, he realized his voice sounded a bit hoarse. He quickly cleared his throat and regained his composure. "It seems that you do have some talent for spirit array mastery after all." Upon hearing this, Mu Chen let out a breath of relief. So he hadn't made a mistake. Cough. "Although you do have some talent in this field, don't get too arrogant. Mr. One is right." Mu Chen took the lesson to heart. Wenling glanced at the young man and noticed that his dark eyes were as calm as a deep pool, without a trace of the arrogance or self-satisfaction one might expect from a young person. This made Wenling secretly admire him. This little guy would one day surpass his father and reach an astonishing height. Mu Feng, the domain lord, certainly had an extraordinary son. Although the number of spirit seals you formed is decent, the spiritual energy is scattered and unable to condense properly, which is why they dissipated so quickly. Such spirit seals cannot be used to set up spirit arrays. Perhaps because of Mu Chen's composed attitude and his focused approach to learning, Wenling's usually stern face softened slightly. He had initially agreed to teach Mu Chen about spirit arrays with a sense of duty, but now, seeing Mu Chen's talent and attitude, he felt a budding sense of affection for such a gifted student. Mu Chen furrowed his brows in thought before nodding. The spiritual energy in the spirit seals was indeed too dispersed. From now on, you'll focus entirely on refining your spirit seals. Once you manage to condense these 5 spirit seals and can disperse them at will, I will teach you how to set up some basic spirit arrays. Now, continue refining, and I will explain the finer details you need to pay attention to during the process. Thank you, Mr. Wan. The afternoon passed quickly. As dusk fell, when Ling looked at the young man, still deeply absorbed in refining the spirit seals, a satisfied smile appeared on his face. He stood up and quietly left the room. When Ling headed directly to the back hall, where he found Mu Feng discussing matters with Zhou Yi in the meeting hall. Hee, Mr. Wan, how's that boy doing? Does he really have the talent? Mu Feng quickly asked when he saw Wen Ling, his expression eager. If Mu Chen lacked the talent, then what was the point of inheriting his legacy? Congratulations, Domain Lord. Wen Ling clasped his hands together in a salute, a smile appearing on his typically stern face. The young master's talent in this area is not weaker than his talent for cultivation. At this rate, he might complete the introductory course in just 10 days. Mu Feng sighed in relief upon hearing this and grinned widely. This boy was truly impressive. He hadn't disappointed his mother. Little Mu's talent is astonishing, Zhou Yi said, a rare soft smile forming on his usually cold face as he turned to Mu Feng. It seems it's only a matter of time before he surpasses you. Of course. Just look at who his father is, Mu Feng replied smugly, grinning even more proudly than when he had gained the upper hand in his rivalry with Liu Domain. By the way, has there been any movement from Liu Domain? Mu Feng suddenly asked. Some. Our spies report that many skilled individuals seem to be gathering in Liu City. Liu Domain is likely preparing for something in secret, Zhou Yi answered. Mu Feng nodded, his eyes narrowing slightly, a sharp gleam in them. Keep a close watch on them. Once they move, we'll act immediately. We can't let the 9 nether sparrow fall into their hands. Days passed, and Mu Chen spent most of his time focusing on refining the spirit seals. Although he had recently entered the late spirit movement stage, and could attempt to break through to the spirit wheel stage with the help of spirit gathering pills and the remaining jade spirit fruits, he wisely decided against this. Now was the time to lay a solid foundation, and rushing through it might lead to undesirable results. Refining the spirit seals also allowed him to improve his control over spiritual energy, so it was a win-win. In just 5 days, Mu Chen had completely condensed the 5 spirit seals, with no sign of them dispersing due to uneven distribution of spiritual energy. When Wen Ling saw that Mu Chen had solidified the 5 spirit seals, he was impressed, though he maintained a neutral expression. He then began to teach Mu Chen how to set up spirit arrays as promised. At this point, Mu Chen truly realized how difficult it was to set up a spirit array. Even though he appeared to have considerable talent in this area, he repeatedly failed when trying to arrange a minor spirit array, which wasn't even a first-grade spirit array. Wen Ling, however, seemed unbothered by his repeated failures. If Mu Chen could set up a minor spirit array in just a few days, it would undermine the entire profession of spirit array masters. However, amidst this continuous failure, Mu Chen gradually began to grasp some techniques. It wasn't until an afternoon 2 weeks later that he finally succeeded in setting up a minor spirit array. In the courtyard, Mu Chen took a deep breath, his mind focused. Between his palms, 8 spirit seals flickered with a faint glow. This was the result of his efforts during his recent training. Now, he could simultaneously refine and control all 8 spirit seals. Not far from him, Wen Ling watched closely. During this period, Mu Chen had been attempting to set up a minor spirit array but had failed each time. However, despite the constant failures, Wen Ling could sense that Mu Chen was rapidly approaching success. This young man seemed to possess the ability to continuously improve through his failures. Whoosh! Mu Chen's gaze was calm. In the next instant, he suddenly shook his arms, and the 8 spirit seals within his palms shot out violently, disappearing into the air as if they merged with it. As the spirit seals vanished, Wen Ling's eyes narrowed slightly. She could vaguely see that the 8 spirit seals had each occupied a peculiar position in the air, from which beams of light shot out. These beams intersected and connected in a complex, intricate pattern, and when the final beam completed the complicated and obscure intersection, Wen Ling immediately felt the spiritual energy in the surrounding environment surge rapidly. In the air, faint flashes of light appeared and quietly faded. If one were not paying close attention, it would have been nearly impossible to notice. Mu Chen suddenly opened his eyes, a look of delight flooding his black pupils. He had succeeded. Clap, clap. Not far away, Wen Ling's face revealed a satisfied smile. He lightly clapped his hands and walked over, saying, "Congratulations on successfully setting up your first spirit array." Mu Chen also smiled in joy. Although this minor spirit array was hardly even comparable to a first-grade spirit array, it was still enough to excite him. Wen Ling took a step forward and entered the range of the minor spirit array. Suddenly, the air around him twisted violently, and a small light array appeared. Several beams of spiritual light shot out, wrapping around Wen Ling's limbs and body like ropes. Not bad. Wen Ling smiled faintly. With a shake of his body, a surge of spiritual energy erupted, breaking the restraints with ease. A minor spirit array that couldn't even reach the first grade level was clearly not enough to bind him, who was prepared. This minor spirit array is called the Spirit Binding Array. While it may not qualify as a first-grade spirit array, it still has some use. If an opponent isn't careful, it can at least delay them for a moment, and that will give you a good opportunity. Wen Ling explained. Mu Chen nodded. It was exactly because of this function of the Spirit Binding Array that he had been focusing on studying it during this period. Mr. Wan, when can I set up a first-grade spirit array? Mu Chen asked. Although the minor spirit array had some use, it was still limited. Only when he could set up a first-grade spirit array would he truly be formidable. A first-grade spirit array requires at least 15 spirit seals. You are still some distance away from that, Wen Ling replied. 15 spirit seals. Mu Chen nodded slightly. Ever since he had been able to refine 8 spirit seals, he had started to feel the increasing difficulty. To reach the level of 15 spirit seals, he would need to put in a lot more effort. Since you now have the ability to set up a minor spirit array, in the coming days, I will have you study as many other minor spirit arrays as possible to lay a foundation for your future. While these arrays are not too complicated, they are the most basic, Wen Ling said with a rare smile. It seemed that he was quite pleased with Mu Chen's progress. Understood. Mu Chen smiled and nodded. Ever since he had come into contact with spirit arrays, he had found himself very interested in them. Could this be an ability his mother had passed down to him? Thinking of this, Mu Chen couldn't help but smile. He was also curious. According to his father, his mother was exceptionally skilled in spirit arrays, but he didn't know what rank of spirit array master she was. Over the next several days, while not neglecting his spiritual energy cultivation, Mu Chen immersed himself in studying other minor spirit arrays. Through this study, his understanding of spirit arrays deepened, and the number of spirit seals he could refine also increased. On this day, Mu Chen keenly sensed a strange atmosphere in the Mu Manor, different from usual. After a brief moment of thought, his heart stirred, and he immediately headed for the manor's council hall. Outside the council hall, numerous guards were stationed, but upon seeing Mu Chen, they did not obstruct him, clearly having received prior instructions. Mu Chen walked straight into the hall and saw several figures inside. The most notable were 5 individuals, sitting in the hall. Though their physiques varied, each exuded an air of sharpness, and the spiritual energy radiating from them was quite formidable. Those are the 5 city lords of Liu Domain. Mu Chen, recognizing the familiar faces, was slightly surprised. These 5 were his father's trusted generals, responsible for overseeing the 5 cities of Liu Domain. Usually, they were stationed in their respective cities, so he didn't expect them all to gather here today. Upon seeing Mu Chen enter, Mu Feng merely waved his hand, signaling Mu Chen to come over. "Young master," the 5 figures greeted with a respectful nod and smile. "Uncle Duan, why are you all being so formal with me?" Mu Chen smiled, his tone friendly. He was not unfamiliar with these 5. "Hee, the young master has grown up," the leader, a lean middle-aged man, chuckled, and the other 4 followed with smiles. The previously tense atmosphere relaxed considerably. Mu Feng also smiled before raising his hand to calm the room, signaling for silence. "I've already briefed you all on the situation. We've received word from our scouts that Liu Domain has begun moving towards the dark abyss, so we will be leaving immediately. Mu Feng's stern gaze swept over everyone as he continued. This mission is of great importance. Zhou Yi and I will personally lead the team. 2 of you will stay behind to guard Mu Domain, while the remaining 3 will accompany us. Listening to the conversation, Mu Chen clicked his tongue slightly. It seemed his father was sending out the best of the best. His father really placed great importance on the 9 Nether Sparrow. Liu Domain is taking this operation very seriously as well, Zhou Yi added. Not only will Liu Qingtian take the field personally, but Liu Zong and Liu Ming will also join. Mu Chen was slightly enlightened upon hearing this. Liu Qingtian and Liu Zong were both powerful beings in the Divine Soul stage, and Liu Ming was about to break through as well. This formidable lineup explained why his father and Uncle Zhou would both lead the charge. The 5 city lords also looked grave, clearly feeling the pressure from Liu Domain's forces. Duan Wei, the lean middle-aged man, pondered for a moment before speaking, then I, Tai Lang, and Chen Xiong will lead the team alongside the Domain Lord. The other 2 will stay to guard Mu Domain. Does that sound good? Mu Feng nodded and then waved his hand. Each of you is to bring a small team with you. Their strength must be no lower than the late spirit movement stage, and they must be experienced veterans. This operation cannot afford any mistakes. Understood. The 5 city lords responded in unison, then grinned. Looks like we're finally going to clash with Liu Domain. It's been a long time since we've had a proper fight. Mu Feng smiled faintly, his eyes glowing with a hint of fiery passion. While others feared Liu Domain, Mu Domain did not. This time, for the 9 Nether Sparrow, he was ready to confront them head-on. Mu Chen, standing nearby, watched the rising battle intent in the council hall. He licked his lips, a sense of anticipation growing for the somewhat mysterious 9 Nether Sparrow. After all, no spirit beast of such caliber had ever appeared in the northern spirit realm. He wondered who would ultimately claim this prize. The Dark Abyss, located in the southern part of the northern spirit realm, was a rather remote and dangerous area. Due to its perilous nature, it was sparsely populated, with very few travelers venturing near. Mu Domain was quite far from the Dark Abyss, so it took Mu Feng and the others 3 days to arrive. Standing on a hillside, Mu Chen gazed ahead. What lay before him was a vast, pitch-black forest. Above the seemingly endless forest, a grayish death miasma hung in the air. This miasma was highly toxic, and even a strong cultivator in the spirit wheel stage would not dare allow it to seep into their body. Though still at some distance, Mu Chen could already sense the thick death energy and a foul stench emanating from the Dark Abyss. Compared to the northern spirit wilderness, this place was far more dangerous. The people from Liu Domain should have already arrived at the Dark Abyss. They entered through the western passage. Perhaps we will encounter them soon after we enter, Zhou Yi said solemnly, gazing towards the Dark Abyss. Mu Feng nodded slightly, then took out a jade bottle containing some dark red pills. Everyone take these antidote pills. While they won't fully neutralize the strong toxins, they will offer some resistance against the death miasma. Mu Chen also took an antidote pill and swallowed it. Immediately, he felt a cooling sensation spread through his body, likely from the pill taking effect. You all know the dangers of the Dark Abyss, so stay alert. Let's move. Seeing that everyone was ready, Mu Feng didn't hesitate any longer. He waved his hand, and his figure surged forward, heading straight for the distant Dark Abyss. Zhou Yi, Mu Chen, and the others quickly followed. The group of nearly 100 people formed a sizable line, but Mu Feng's team consisted of seasoned veterans with considerable experience. As a result, their movement was silent, without even a hint of smoke or dust. They quietly slipped into the death miasma-filled Dark Abyss. After entering the Dark Abyss, Mu Chen immediately felt an ominous chill spreading from all directions, causing the blood in his body to stiffen slightly. His eyes scanned the dim surroundings warily. Compared to the northern spirit wilderness, this place felt eerily quiet. But it was precisely this silence that made it more unsettling. The group moved cautiously, with every member's body tensed. Their hands gripped their gleaming blades, and spiritual energy flowed quietly. Though they were being extremely cautious, The dark abyss was clearly a treacherous place, filled with hidden dangers. Suddenly, a piercing scream echoed through the group as a massive, pitch-black, hideous snake lunged out from beneath the rotting branches and leaves of the ground. The giant snake's massive body twisted, swiftly swallowing two of the unsuspecting Liu Domain experts. Black saliva dripped from its gaping mouth, corroding the dry leaves on the ground, indicating the presence of deadly toxins. It's a dark abyss snake. The group fell into temporary chaos at the sudden attack, but they quickly regained their composure. Everyone stared in shock at the vicious, black serpent. This was a mid-level spirit beast, comparable to someone at the mid-spirit wheel stage. They hadn't expected to encounter such a powerful creature so soon after entering the dark abyss. Humph! Zhou Yi frowned and snorted coldly. He took a forceful step forward, and his immense spiritual energy erupted. His figure flickered and appeared directly above the dark abyss snake. He then stomped down heavily on the snake's massive body. Roar! As Zhou Ye's feet slammed down, spiritual energy flickered behind him, transforming into the vague shape of an enormous beast. A giant rhinoceros, its back covered in thick, heavy scales, and seeming to carry a small mountain atop it. Boom! With the appearance of the deep yellow rhinoceros, Zhou Ye's body became as heavy as a mountain. The immense weight exploded outward, crushing the dark abyss snake into the ground. The earth trembled as the snake let out a wailing cry before collapsing, its body crushed into a bloody mess. A mid-level spirit beast, comparable to someone at the mid-spirit wheel stage, was simply crushed to death by Zhou Yi. Chen couldn't help but exclaim in awe at the sight. Your Uncle Zhou has now entered the early divine soul stage. The spirit beast essence he refined was from the mountain rhinoceros, ranked 180th on the beast catalog Earth list. When its weight comes down, it's like a mountain falling on someone, instantly turning them into paste, Mu Feng explained. Chen nodded enviously. When would he be able to obtain his own spirit beast essence? Zhou Yi retrieved the dark abyss snake's spirit beast essence, then returned to the group. The dark abyss is fraught with danger. If you don't want to lose your lives, stay alert. The group quickly responded. Despite their wariness of the dark abyss, it was clear that they needed to be even more cautious. After dealing with the dark abyss snake, the group continued their journey, but now they were more careful than ever. Though cautious, which slowed their progress slightly, the group achieved notable results. After the encounter with the dark abyss snake, they faced several more sudden and stealthy attacks. Fortunately, no further casualties occurred, though a dozen or so were lightly wounded. This careful advance continued for nearly half an hour, and the team, led by Mu Feng, finally began to delve deeper into the dark abyss. However, the surrounding environment grew eerily silent, adding to the unsettling atmosphere. Clack! Mu Feng, leading the group, suddenly halted. His sharp gaze pierced the dark forest ahead, which reeked of decay. With a cold laugh, he said, Lu Qingtian, when did you become so fond of hiding and lurking in the shadows? The others were startled, quickly gripping their weapons and turning their eyes toward the dark forest. Had they finally encountered someone from Liu Domain? Chen, too, stared in that direction. This encounter had come sooner than he expected. Mu Feng, your Liu Domain truly never gives up, does it? Soon after Mu Feng's words, a faint laugh echoed from the dark forest, followed by the sound of footsteps. Figures slowly emerged from the woods, at least 100 of them, forming a formidable lineup. Chen's eyes quickly scanned the group, landing on the front. There stood a middle-aged man in a green robe, smiling faintly. His sunken eyes, sharp and piercing like a predator, caused a chill to run through the heart. Lu Qingtian, Lord of Liu Domain. Chen's lips tightened. This man was none other than the most powerful figure in the northern spirit realm, Lu Qingtian. Beside him was a frail middle-aged man with piercing green eyes and an indifferent expression. His faint spiritual energy fluctuations revealed that he was a strong cultivator at the divine soul stage. Lu Zong, second elder of Liu Domain. Chen quickly recognized him, noticing Lu Ming, whom he had met before, standing behind Lu Zong. To his surprise, Lu Mubai was also there. It seemed this time even he had come along. The tension between both sides was palpable. Everyone's eyes turned cold, and spiritual energy quietly surged. The atmosphere grew tense, like the calm before a storm. "Kid, so it was you who took that thing." Lu Ming and Lu Mubai's expressions hardened upon seeing Mu Chen following Mu Feng. The strong man's eyes gleamed with hatred. Though he had suspected it before, confirmation made him seethe with rage. As the third elder of Liu Domain, how could he tolerate being toyed with by a mere youth? Mu Chen, unfazed by Lu Ming's venomous glare, smiled faintly and then turned to Lu Mubai, whose cold eyes locked onto him. "I must thank you for the wonderful gift you gave me." Lu Mubai narrowed his eyes, his voice cold. "You're indeed lucky." Mu Chen smiled, his grin further irritating Lu Ming. "Heh, Mu Feng, you've got quite a son," Lu Qingtian remarked, his gaze cool as he appraised Mu Chen. It was clear he understood that the primary reason for Mu Domain's appearance was because of Mu Chen. Mu Feng, his expression indifferent, responded, "Liu Domain, you're quite greedy. Good things should be shared, not hoarded. Don't you think? What? You want to have it all to yourselves? Don't you fear choking on it?" Lu Zong sneered from beside Lu Qingtian. "Perhaps it's you who will choke." Zhou Yi sneered as well. Lu Zong's cold smile grew wider. "With all of Mu Domain's elite here, if you're all wiped out, I'll be more than happy to help rule your domain. Don't be too sure you have the ability." Zhou Yi spoke slowly, his tone mocking. The two sides fell silent, but their eyes exchanged icy glares. Spiritual energy rippled as tension mounted. A bloody confrontation seemed imminent. Mu Chen observed the situation, quietly gathering his spiritual energy. But just as he prepared, his ears twitched, and his gaze shifted toward the deeper shadows of the dark abyss. There was something unusual, a faint noise emanating from that direction. Humming.